Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our weekly market overview where we try to gauge the market for this week coming. Quick disclaimer, anything you see in this video is not financial advice, it's merely for educational purposes. And let's get started. Okay, so first and foremost, we always like to look at the weekly candle here. Let's take a look at some things I've noticed. So for our weekly candle, overall, it's a very bullish candle. Obviously, it's back to back green, so it's a bullish continuation. Us holding over the 200 is just overall fairly bullish. Um, get that out the gate. The one thing I did notice is if you look at the upper body of this candle, right, we have a nice bullish full body candle and a minimal wick, right? Um, Minimal wick suggests that there was no real rejection above, like there was no overhead rejection that took place. Um, more than likely, what we had was buyers starting to exhaust on the way up. And it kind of makes sense because we were looking at this week, we just saw this slow grind up. There was no like nice push up, no real trend. It was just kind of a slow, methodical push up, right? And another thing we noticed here is at the bottom of this wick, so we didn't really get a large lower wick similar to here, right? Where we have a large lower wick, or even the opposite, where we have a large upper wick.
Smoove, we cannot see the screen.
Oh, you cannot see
Sorry.
the screen. Okay. Thank you guys for telling me that. Alrighty. That is working for you guys now?
It's good, yeah.
Okay, okay. All right, perfect. All right. Hopefully it's not sharing audio so you guys don't. Okay, perfect. All right, so start again. So basically, what I see here in our weekly candle is a large full body candle indicating bullish strength here, especially since we're on a continued higher low currently. This is more of a softer high low as opposed to nice clean higher low prints here. Um, but what we do have, besides just the bullish continuation, obviously there's a little bit of a gap here, but just based off of our weekly candle, what I'm seeing here is little rejection to the upside, right? When you don't really have much of a wick, if you look at this example here where we have a large body wick at the bottom, at the top, we have another one at the bottom here. Um, this usually signifies, right? For here, for example, let's look at this one. This signifies a rejection of that range, right? Where sellers are defending that line, they're stepping up greatly and assuring price does not move any higher, right? And then the opposite is true for this one, where we have a large push towards the lower end of the range, and buyers stepped up pretty greatly to close us back into a healthy range, if you want to say it like that. So it shows more of a rejection to go lower, rejection to go lower. Here, it's not necessarily a huge rejection to go lower. Part of the reason I believe that, we'll see on the lower time frames, you'll see, but aside from that, just this entire week we've had kind of a slow grind up. So any pullbacks that were happening, it was more controlled than anything else. So this is more this lower body wick with a nice large body above kind of shows you that there was some dip buying happening, right? Basically, there was controlled selling, so as we're going up, buyers are pulling it back just enough, closing just enough to get a re-entry for the upside. And that's kind of what we had this week, right? We just had like these slow grinds, but it's been going up. It literally, the chart looks like this. Um and that's just controlled selling. Um I wouldn't say that it's necessarily completely bullish because we do have a little bit of a gap here, and especially since we had that news this week, the Moody's, which is basically, it's one of the three credit rating major credit rating services and in the to assess the U.S. market. And basically, what they did and what that huge news headline was, to boil it down in simple terms, they believe, right, because it's a belief, they believe that the U.S.'s debt is growing faster than the economy is um, growing or expanding, right? So we're basically, uh, if you think of it as like a personal credit line, we're our credit cards are more than we're making a year, in the most simplest terms, and that's what they believe. um it it gave us that little pullback that we had in the market. It wasn't super aggressive just yet. We really won't know until tomorrow morning when it opens. But considering we had this push all week, I'll go ahead and go to the daily in a second, but we had this push all week, really slow grind up. No significant pullbacks were like took place for us to have a nice like solid push up. We've kind of just been slowly grinding up. Where bears were basically trapped the whole way, all the way. Any pullback was very minor and it pushed right back up, consolidated, pulled back a little bit, pushed right back up. It really wasn't didn't really have much room for buy for sellers to step in greatly. So with that news, I think the timing was pretty perfect to have us have that pullback. Even if we have a pullback and we test towards this 200 daily moving average around 574, I know that's a heavy pullback, but it is fairly healthy, and we would not invalidate um our uptrend, right? We have a little bit of room to create a strong like higher low somewhere right here, like on our weekly trend, right? So we do have we let's draw it like that. So we do have a little bit of room to have a candle that sort of looks, I guess I'm just gonna draw the wick and the body afterwards. um Kind of like this, if that looks decent enough, or we kind of bounce off the 200 and push us back into the range. That's very possible, so I'm gonna be looking out for that on the during this week. One thing I do want to mention as far as our weekly, I'm gonna go ahead and yeah, okay, it's a lot of drawings here, but I do have, yes, so just to focus on our fibs here. So I basically drew a fib from, let's just put roughly around, let's call it roughly like 532 area, and then I'll close it off. Okay, so I drew a fib from our lows here to where we were on the highs, and our 61 is sitting at roughly around 532. So any pullback there, as long as we're still maintaining price above here, we have continued confidence that any pullback could still lead us back to the original target, which, well, the original range, right? So until we start breaking under 532, roughly, it's unlikely that we would fail this trend just yet. So any holds, any higher low holds, at least on the weekly, the daily, over 532, still leads us with confidence that we could go back and test that 600 range. So, um, for any, bears out there, at least that right there is gonna give you at least some confidence on how much we really need to dig deep before it starts to feel like the trend has failed. And for me, the 61 right here, any higher low or any price action above that, still maintains the bullish stance. It's very easy for price to pull back towards the 61 and then have a push straight back up. So until we have a break underneath that 532-ish level, um, higher lows are very much possible for us to bring us back into that range that we were just last week, if not even higher. Moving on to our um, daily here. Let's look at the daily candle. So interestingly enough, um, a lot of the pullback that I'm sort of anticipating a pullback near the our yellow line here is our 5 daily moving average. So I was anticipating a pullback near there. It really was not happening. at all until the very end of the day. So right after the market closed, it had this massive sell off. We actually came down and supported just like slightly above our 5-day moving average, and futures is currently opening at it. um if I'm not mistaken, it has bounced several times off of the 5-day moving average currently. So until we start having, ooh, wrong, no, wrong one. Okay. So until we start having our 5 daily moving average here, until that starts to become some sort of resistance, um, we're still upholding this uptrend. And even if we do have any type of fade, our 200 is going to be a very strong line of defense. You'll see it on QQQ where it's a little bit more, I would say, solid of a support as opposed to SPY, because we do have obviously a huge gap here, right? And right in between that gap is the 200. We did not get any test of the 200, right, on this entire, like, last, not last week, the week prior, where we kind of were having these um weird body candles here where it's like long upper wicks, lower wicks, very small body. A lot of the times our many of the targets were that 200 daily moving average, right? At least to see a test there to see if we can break over it, or if we reject under it. That was most likely a lot of the like the idea behind the price action. And you definitely wanted to see like the 5-day either act as some type of resistance or as act as some type of support. And actually both those things did end up taking place. And then we had this huge gap up that happened, right? So we didn't really get some type of solid direction in the sense that, did we reject or support over the 200? Are we breaking below and resisting at the 5-day moving average trend, but we're still holding up our 50, meaning that short term we're pulling back, but long term we're still somewhat bullish? We didn't really get that yet, right? We just had this huge gap up, and our 200 there, which is supposed to be our major level of support or resistance on a longer term trend. It's sitting flat in the middle of a gap. So as far as the downside, like I said, I do want to see this five starting to curl down a little bit, and act as some type of resistance. If we do have a pullback, I still think that let's draw it in red, our 200 may still be a difficult task to break under, right? Even if we have a slight look below, we recapture it and then just bounce right back into range. That's very possible. Um, Especially with how we had this price action all week where we have this slow grind up, right? It's not necessarily a huge steep up. I know it looks like that when I'm drawing the line, but on a smaller time frame, you'll see it's a very small grind up, right? We had the small grind up, a small grind up. We haven't had any deeper pullbacks just yet. And for me personally, it seems, especially when I go into the QQQ, you'll see it a little bit better as well, where it feels like buyers are starting to get exhausted a little bit, but sellers aren't stepping in. They're still afraid to short this, right? Especially since we're holding over the 200, right? Because if we do have any pullback here, it's very likely for us to have a pullback that sort of supports at our 200 here, or at our 200. Yep, a pullback that's kind of supports around here, fakes that gap fill and pushes us back up. So until we have that 5 day starting to turn into resistance here, it could be just sellers are starting to get exhausted, right? We're not getting much follow through on the upside, but we're definitely not getting any strong aggressive selling either, right? So we're kind of sitting in the middle here. The news catalyst kind of gave us slight direction. Even if it's momentarily. Like I said, I'm waiting for this week to come out to really see if any direction can be chosen here. We, like I showed on the weekly as well, um, we could have a higher low at any point, that even if we do break underneath the 200, let's say we don't support it, we still have our 20 and our 50 here. that's well above that threshold that I mentioned, 532. It's well above that range there. So if we do have a pullback, a higher low off of the 200 of the 20 is very likely. A higher low off of the 200 is likely. And if we do have a break underneath the 20, I would think a little bit of consolidation here, where we kind of hover near the 50 would be likely before we have a push up. It wouldn't be as strong of a bounce as the 200 or a 20-day bounce, just because it's more of a midterm. Moving average is sitting in between a longer term but slightly short term trend. So a bounce off of there, usually we don't get a strong bounce off the 50. It's more of a hug. We usually hug it and either resist or just kind of bounce in between it, and it'll be more of a pivotal kind of action. Um, that's why I'm not too concerned with like having a test there and then a bounce. I want to see how price reacts there. Maybe we have a catalyst that pushes us straight underneath. But most likely it definitely would be a hard slowdown as opposed to the 200 possibly just being a crazy bounce that leads to further downside, and a 20-day as well could be a nice decent bounce that leads to further downside. Our 50 is going to be more of like a safe haven where we can kind of hope expect price to slow down and kind of sit there for a moment. You can kind of see it here. Um the previous last week where it kind of is hovering near it, waiting to see if our 5-day can start to catch up. If buyers do step in, we had significantly low volume in that range, but we still maintain price action just right around that 50 here. Okay, and now let's go through our pathing here. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. Try to keep it slight short. Um, as well as I know a lot of you did like my notes that I posted in my channel. So if you guys want, I can also post my notes that I do um throughout the live, like afterwards as well. If that does help you guys, do let me know. Let's draw the pathing here. Okay. So pathing wise, if I just look at what's been happening here, right? So you see this orange, our orange trend line here. It's more of a very slow grind to the upside, right? It's more of it's a bullish trend line, but it's not as strong as if I had these green trend lines here where they're increasing volume and nice price action that kind of shoots straight up. So we've had this slow grind for a while, and this is kind of where I was mentioning how we have buyers seemingly being exhausted um as we're just grinding up. And if you just look at just this trend here, we're in a very fixed range here to the upside. So it we're not getting much follow through where buyers are stepping in heavily, but we don't have any sellers that are aggressively selling as well. It just seems like we had this week full of essentially bear traps along the way, right? Every single pullback we had kind of led to a little bit of a bear trap. Even you look here, even though this was a smaller move, this is towards the opening where we had a push down and then eventually pushed right back up. Retraced towards the opening print and then still maintain price action. Once again, we're starting to bounce off the this orange trend line here. Um, Once again here, any sort of pullback we have just kind of traps the bear. So we have bear traps that are being set every single second here this week, especially with right, where is it? Oh no, never mind. Yeah, so this trend line. I was looking for it, it's right there. So I was looking at from here and I was like, wait, where's price action? But anyways, so we do have a pretty slow grind up on the upside here. What I'm looking for right now is if you see this, what other colors do I have? I have purple. Yeah, I have purple. Okay, so our pink here, I'm just gonna draw it in. I guess it is pink. So these lighter pink channels here. It's essentially more of a bearish tone, right? I want to see it kind of price action kind of curl near it and struggle to break over it. It's showing me that like bears are in control of price action. Just drawing off based off these lines here, I'm not seeing that. We're just having we're just breaking right through it. Even on any little pullback, it's kind of supporting the overall uptrend here. So I don't see any bearish controls just yet. What I do want to start to see for some downside now is to start to see something like this where we have our orange. Here's our orange trend line here, maintaining the orange trend line. If you hopefully you guys can see that. And what I want to see is more of a head and shoulders pattern that can play out right here. With a confirmation is going to be the break out of here, which is around the 588, 589 area, which was a pretty decent support for a while, right? We had it as resistance, it recaptured, and price kind of consolidated near that area. So it would be a nice area to kind of grab some liquidity. We have a little bit of a chop, and then we start to flush underneath. So once again, I'll draw it out here. What I want to see is something like this, where we start to break out of this orange, and I want to see us continue to resist at this purple trend line, pink trend line, however you want to look at it, pink trend line. And I want to see us break out of this yellow here. So our yellow is more of like a consolidation period that takes place. So that's what I'm looking at here. If I just draw it, you kind of see the consolidation where we're resisting it, maintaining price action inside of it, maintaining price action inside of it, where we're not necessarily breaking below it, but we're not breaking out of it. Essentially a consolidation zone. So for me, the confirmation would be something that sort of breaks us out of our orange uptrend here, continues to reject near this pink channel here, and we have a downside that kind of consolidates in this range where we kind of struggle at near our pivot here. We have a 590 pivot, so this is a perfect spot for price to kind of hover and bounce around. There's enough volume in this 590 area to have it kind of consolidate in that range where we're looking above and below it until we finally get a break out of it here. The confirmation would be the break out of here. If you want to play it safe, I don't know if we're going to get that full range just yet. It's not out of the woods. Well, you could look towards our weak pivotal point here. It's at 584.60 if I'm not mistaken. But for me, I'm really just looking to see this trend line here just break out here, where we have kind of a struggle here and then we break down and create our head and shoulders here. That's one of the path things that I'm looking towards. A good confirmation would probably be the break here, but an early take could be here. But just be careful, as if we do get a pullback here and we break back into this, if we do break out of this, so we have a pullback, let's say we're pulling back, consolidating. The moment we break out of this, that kind of invalidates that structure, and we could have a push towards the upside again, especially if we're starting to recapture this 590 area. So if you are looking for some downside and you're looking to see this head and shoulders play out, you definitely don't want to see us break out of this trend line here. Try to keep you guys updated throughout the week as far as that. If you want to play it as safe as possible, I would say a break of this trend line here to the downside would be way more risk to rewarding, because then you can have that 200-day be your target. So roughly around the 584 area can give you a nice push towards that 573, which is a pretty decent $10 range if we can get that this week. So I would be on the lookout for that. May not happen this week. It could lead to it this week, where we can kind of have that pull back here, pull back, kind of chop around here, and then next week Monday or something we do have that push out of the trend line, and then gives us that huge early push down towards this range. So just be on the lookout to see if we do have some type of slower grind on the downside that starts to reject, especially that 590 level. And then for the upside, I'll quickly do the upside here. So for the upside, what I'm looking for, do I have blue? Oh, to mention as well. Sorry, let's do that. To mention on the downside, I do want to see a strong trend to the downside. So selling that's really aggressive here, even if we have a little bit of a break out of it, that's where your shoulder is gonna form. So look for some heavy selling that takes place, maybe something like this, where it's a very strong selling that's taking place where we're pushing down hard. The moment we break out of that trend and consolidate a bit, that is your right shoulder for your head and shoulders. So that's one way to look at it. If you're ever curious, like how can that head and shoulders play out, you definitely want to start seeing a strong downtrend that's holding. Once we break out of that downtrend and start to consolidate in range a little bit, that's where that potential shoulder could be building out for the downside. So let's go to the upside now. Let's not be too pessimistic. So for the upside, scroll down a little bit here. Okay, so for the upside, what I'm essentially looking for is kind of the opposite, an inverse actually. An inverse that kind of takes place just at that 580, just before we get to the 200. It could be near the 200 where we get the head, but I'm looking more likely for a push just above it, more of a fake out than anything else, where we can have our inverse head and shoulders that kind of plays out like this, where we do get that break of that yellow trend line where bears start to feel confident to step in. We do have a push down, and if they're not covering and they're not getting out in time, I do see us bouncing around this 580 pivot here. And if we can bounce near this 580 and maintain price action that pushes us back in this range, where we're kind of wedging between this our bearish control and our consolidation trend line here, we kind of struggle right here. The moment we have that break, it could be there. Our break could also be, if I continue this line down here, continue this line down here, a break could also be where we're slowly starting to curl up like this, and then break back in something like this, and we consolidate near that 590 area. That would be our inverse for the upside to break and try to take out that our pivotal point here at 595. And a break out of that range would definitely be I would say an easy target if we can break over this 590 level, 95 level and support. An easy target near the 603 is very possible. And then for the downside underneath that 584, your 200 is going to be kind of where you want to head towards. So hopefully that kind of helped out a little bit there. It made sense where we have a deeper pullback here to create the head, or our head of our inverse head and shoulders. Um, every I always say this, every head and shoulders has a possible inverse head and shoulder that can play out, right? So the confirmation of that head and shoulders is a very great potential for an inverse, the head for the inverse head and shoulders to have that breakout. So just be on the lookout for that. That's what I would be looking for. You definitely want to start seeing, if we start to break under, like I said, 585 is going to be like 585, 584. It's going to be your I would say your do or die zone, where we either break down and then have that bounce, or we break down and follow through towards the 200 moving average. All right, quickly, I'll just go through the rest of this real quick. IWM, I don't really have too much to say, so that'll probably be a little bit quicker. So for our QQQ, let's go to the weekly first. So QQQ, same rules apply here, where we're over the 61. I draw it out right here. Essentially 455, pretty much 455. As long as we're over it, Any lower high can be a continuation of this bull trend. So any pullback here, even if we're still over this 61 area, it's still a potential for a bounce to us for us to recapture the highs that it was we were at. So it's still very bullish until we start breaking underneath 455. Any higher low is not going to invalidate this trend. Um, so let's go back to this. All right. And then for our daily or weekly candle here, it's similar to SPY, same situation where we don't really have a rejection above. We just kind of see buyers start to exhaust slightly, and um, buyers are defending the lower end of our range. Not a huge rejection of the range, more of a controlled pullback here since we have a large body candle, um, a large body green candle. This is what I was looking for before on SPY here, right, where we didn't have that test of the 200. We did get it on QQQ, right? It actually got 2 weeks of a rejection near that 200, and now we have a break above it. So if we do have any sort of pullback, right, this news pulls us back at all, and we have a deeper pullback, a higher low off of this 200 is very possible to continue the uptrend up onto the upside, because now we have 2 weeks of price action that kind of hovers near that 200. So I consider it a stronger support as opposed to SPY, where we didn't really get that test, so we don't know how comfortable SPY is with that complete uptrend, as opposed to QQQ where we do have that rejection here. So there's enough volume or liquidity down at the 200 for us to have a push down towards it and bounce right off of it. So that's one thing I'm going to be looking at as well too, to see if we start seeing QQQ fail at the 200. That's going to probably accelerate SPY's downside as well. And then with QQQ, actually, it pretty much we got the test at the 5 day. Um, it actually broke underneath it, so QQQ is actually underneath the 5 day. It hasn't completely rejected yet. I would look more towards ES or SPY to make sure that any rejections earlier in the day is taking place, or at least before open. So it's not necessarily doing that just yet. With our daily candle here on QQQ, our daily candle here is showing a lot more exhaustion for of buyers. Basically, where we have this uptrend that's maintaining here, we have a slight I wouldn't say this is rejection. This is more so possibly a pullback that took place here because we kind of opened up right back into that range. We didn't break out the previous day's range, so it more likely was a push towards highs, and sellers kind of or buyers kind of closed their positions here, as opposed to on Friday here where we have a really tiny body here, large upper wick. So buyers were up here near the top of the range, and price action sort of had a flush towards the 5. This is midday, right before the bounce near the end of the day, where we had buyers defending price action at the 5 day, or near the 5 day rather, and near the lows of the previous 2 days, but they didn't have enough strength to give us a follow through to either break out of, at least break out and create a range expansion here. All we kind of did was consolidate within this body's previous wicks range. So buyers are still above, or buyers are trying to push price action to the upside, and they're just not having enough strength to have the follow through on um enough strength to have the follow through to break out and expand that range. Hence why we have this really tiny candle here where they're not really stepping in strongly. All they're doing is just making sure price action doesn't fall below. But they're starting to get exhausted. Um, so it's more than likely that we could have a pullback here um, that takes place. And just because of that news and how the market kind of dropped, you can kind of see that possibly have it happening. Um, so I'm gonna be on the lookout for that. For as far as the downside, for QQQ specifically, I didn't show it on the weekly here with the volume profile, but this 511 area, there's aside from the obvious gap there, there's also a significant gap in like a volume gap in just general, right? So we have a price action gap, but there's a pretty decent gap in volume um from 511 to like the 502 503 area. So this area is pretty much has not had much price action um recently, or if not, for a while now. So there's a little bit of a gap in price action in this range. So if we start to break underneath 511, it's more than likely we'll have a push towards the bottom end of this range. Let's hope the 20 starts to catch up. Um or our 200 starts to catch up, or if we do start to see our, once again, that's going to be the main thing, to start to see the 5 day start to become some type of resistance. So where we have price action breaks below, start to reject, then we start to fill underneath that 510 level to push it, 511 level to push us towards that 500. And if we do have some type of consolidation near here for that 200 to start catching up, may not happen this week. It could happen, like I said, next week, where we have a push towards it and then we get that huge recovery bounce. That's one thing that I'm gonna be looking out for. But I did want to mention underneath that 511 area, there's a bit of a gap in price action right around here. 511 to 505, if I'm not mistaken, 505. So there's about a $6 gap in price action in this range, aside from the gap that is there towards the upside. So a break underneath the 511, especially if we start fading underneath 505, is more than likely that a gap fill is very possible. So I would be on the lookout for that. As far as pathing, let's go through the pathing really quickly. I'm gonna pull out our million and bajillions of lines here. Like I said, I will post all of my notes as well after this live, so that way you guys can kind of see the pathing that I was looking at. So for the downside, what I'm looking for on the downside is looking to see if we get, since we have this slow curl up here, we didn't have, it's slightly different than SPY's uptrend here, right? So we do have this similar uptrend where we're holding on a orange, a slower uptrend here. Looks like the game, I don't know the game. So it's a slow, we have a slow buying here that's happening here. But if you look, we still have that consolidation right here, where we're not really having any strong pushes out of it. Buyers continue to get exhausted near the upper bounds of this trend line here. Once again, the yellow trend line tends to be an area where we have some type of consolidation to the upside. So we are consolidating onto the upside here. We're not getting any breakthrough or any follow through on a break. We're kind of just hovering within this range. So more than likely a pullback out of this range to grab some more liquidity, um, where we're basically trapping more bears to the downside, or this could just be a trap where we're trapping the bulls on the upside here. We're kind of burning their premium where they're hoping for higher, but it's not happening. Or what we could do is have a push down here, trap the bears, assuming that they think price action is going to start to flow down or fall down here, and then we have a break back into range. So as far as pathing here, let's go back to that. For the downside, I'm looking at sort of, especially for curling like this, I'm looking for sort of a cup and handle pattern to form here, where our opening would be right around this 510, 511 area. And what we need to see when that handle, the cup closes, right? We need to see the handle form. And how would that form? We would need to see another one of these orange controlled buying, right? Or just slow buying, not strong, not a strong buying sentiment. Something that looks similar to this, where we can have price action that kind of has a recovery bounce near this five, just below that 510 area where we start have buyers stepping in. This is our consolidation range. So a bounce in this range is not out of the woods on this consolidation trend here. So a bounce here, and then we start to reject. Here is our bullish controlled selling, where we basically just have price action that heads towards it, has this pullback, supports off of it, and then once it has the breakthrough, we have a breakout, right? But we didn't really get that there. So it's more than likely we have a deeper pullback that may be taking place because buyers are not getting that follow through. We had the break of the blue trend line here, and we did not have a strong follow through as opposed to just earlier in the week here, where we have rejections near this range, build up some liquidity and pushes up, and we actually had three solid candles that led us to have a nice strong uptrend here, right? So we didn't get that here. So more than likely a nice little pullback could be very much so possible. And what I would like to see is either a rejection here or a rejection here. So we could have price action that kind of chops here. Once we break out of this orange trend line, once again, it's going to be a less steep line. So if you want, you can draw a trend line from the bottom here, roughly towards this long upper wick on the, I think this is Thursday, I want to say Thursday open. So you could draw on a trend line. Basically, this trend line here would be pretty much sufficient enough if you copy that and paste it from the moment we have a bounce. Um, let's say you copy and paste it the moment we have a bounce. You draw it here. The moment we have a break out of that, that's when I would recommend the short. Because then that we would complete the handle for the cup and handle and have our push down to towards the downside here. Like I said, if we start breaking under 511, it's a pretty fast drop towards this 505 area. This is our weak pivotal point, but it also can lead to a nice significant bounce. So I would be on the lookout for that possibly to take place, where we have that cup here start to have a slight buying here. And the moment we break out of that trend line, like I said, I would copy this trend line here, mimic it yourself. It doesn't have to be as perfect, but the steepness is really what's gonna give you the confidence on what that slower buying trend is. If you copy that and, like I said, break out of that trend, that's going to be a nice flush to the downside. So I would be looking out for that. You don't want to short it as it's going down. You want to see how strong the bounce is. And then let's go to the upside. And then for our upside, wasn't seeing too much taking place here, but what I did notice is, let's go green, right? So what I did notice is we continue to have this controlled selling here, right? Where buyers are in control of price action. They're mitigating um, any downside. Either they're covering with some puts, temporary short dated puts, but they're continuing to hold longer dated calls. More than likely is taking place because we have these pushes up that kind of slow grinds down. And then once we have the breakout of our blue trend line here, once again, we have a breakout of blue trend line here, but there was some strong resistance here. So we didn't get that strong follow through like how we got on this day's price action right here. So we didn't really get that follow through in the same manner. But for the upside, we could have something that takes place where, so this trend line here, this blue one, I I kind of roughly placed it there. There's a little bit more wiggle room that could take place, right? We can actually have some type of upside that takes place this week, where we kind of push up here before going down. So I would, if I do make any adjustments, I'll let you know. But essentially, what I'm looking for is to see us kind of slow grind in this light blue channel here. It can grind down as much as possible, but I'm looking for a slower grind down here where we can test just around that 514 area where we had nice solid support here. That's where we had the break above on our gap, essentially a gap up or a bullish run up, and then we kind of supported here this entire time. So more than likely, what I would like to see happen is we start to have this grind down in this Like I said, it could be a little bit wider. So let's say it grinds down in the blue, something like this, where we have a little push underneath that area. First, you got to fake them out before you trap them. So have a slight push underneath here. That'll give us a nice break here where we can recapture this trend line here. And what I would like to see is some type of buying that takes place that's very strong, like a green buying continuation. So where we have a look above, we recapture this five. Let's clean it up a little bit, right? So we have a push down, a look below. Once we start to recapture this 514 level to create that head here for our inverse, I would like to see some type of strong buying that takes place that will push us straight up towards the highs again. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. It could the head and shoulder, the inverse, let's make it just kind of cleaner for you guys to see. Let's say it breaks down towards here. Then we have a break above, consolidate, and then break out. Our head and shoulders would look something like this. Our inverse head and shoulders rather would look something like this. But for me, the confirmations would be after we have this flush down, or I guess slow grind down, we have a little bit of a bounce and the supports near this 514 area. The only thing I want to see is a strong uptrend. I don't want to see a slight uptrend, right? Like where it starts to slowly grind. Then it's more than likely possibly what could be happening is more than likely, let's do orange so you guys can understand. So it's more than likely what could be happening is we could be creating a micro inverse head or micro head and shoulders that would push us to the downside. So what I really want for the upside is not only break below and we recapture this 514, let's say 515 to make it easier. We capture this level and then we have stronger buying that starts to take place that pushes us up. Stronger buying like this, right? So I want to start seeing something like that take place. I don't want to see a slow grind up, ooh, a slow grind up like this. I want to see us break below, recapture this trend line here, and then kind of, even if it consolidates for a bit, I want to see a strong break out of this range here where we have our neckline. Pretty much you could say it's the 519 area. So a break over 519 with strong volume, that'll give us a nice break to the upside, which is, our high low targets are towards the 531 and that 511 area. So let's see how that takes place this week. All right, I have about 10 minutes left here. Let's go to IWM. Looks like okay, that's what that is. I never played that game. Interesting. All right, so for IWM, let's look at the weekly here. Get rid of all these drawings. IWM. So one thing I noticed on IWM, which is actually kind of unusual, is we had a V-shaped recovery. So that normally does not happen on small caps. That's more of like a tech thing or like a fast growing. It could be financials. It's more so fast moving kind of stocks and tickers, right? So small caps don't usually just have a huge bounce or a huge V-shaped recovery. What they normally have is like slow little grinds or we chop for a little bit and make sure that we don't break a support, don't break a support, you know? That's kind of how they normally move. What we kind of have here is just a V-shaped recovery, which is I would say fairly bullish for the small caps. So they're pushing up um way more um way more strongly than anticipated really. And our weekly candle is like a slightly like a hammer candle, but it's not anything major to be considered because we do have a smaller body on there and it does have a little bit of a wick. And we're pretty much back near this oh, not that range, but we're pretty much in this range here, our upper bounds of our range during our bull run here. This is our overhead supply. So we haven't really tested the overhead supply, so I'm not really looking at it as a strong resistance, but it is looking fairly bullish currently. But it does look like buyers are starting to slow down just a little bit. We'll look at it on the smaller time frames, but for currently we actually have if you look on the daily, you'll see it test multiple times. Um, it looks to be supporting at the 5, but having a push up like this and we're already testing the 5, it more than likely will have about a slight pullback that's happening. If you look at how SPY, we had this run up for so long. We're waiting for the 5 day to catch up to decide if we have that short term pullback. IWM had that happen this week, where the 5 did catch up and it started to support off of it. So more than likely a small push underneath, and either we can recapture it or we have a slight rejection of it, and it gives us that little bit of a pullback because we do have this 509 area. We actually closed above it, but 509 is a pretty decent resistance on IWM, and we've been struggling to hold over it. All we've had is our 5 daily SMA kind of supporting it and not letting price go below. And let's go to the daily so you guys can kind of see. So on the daily, especially with this week, and this is what I mean by the the wick, not the wick, the candle is a slight hammer candle because it doesn't necessarily mean fully bullish, but it doesn't mean that there was any rejections above. So what or rejections below either. So what I see right now, just based on our 5 day price action, I see repeated rejections here and a slight we have decreasing volume on a pullback here where we look towards that 5 day retest and we have a push towards those highs there. So for me, it looks like we had whoever was holding longs prior week closed their positions, slowly waited for the 5 day retest here, bought low and sold high near the previous resistance. So it just basically had we basically have sellers that are well, not sellers, but we have buyers that are exiting here. So this is the buyer's exit, and they're basically entering at the 5 day. So until we start having that rejection underneath or break underneath, more than likely IWM is on a buy low, sell high, buy low, sell high, pretty much buy the pullback. IWM is a clear buy the pullback currently. Let's see if that upholds, but that's pretty much what I see. Where we basically have any upside here. Once we make it towards the top, buyer starts to get exhausted. We have a slight pullback, and then they step in once again. Again, you have here where have buyers that are grinding up. We have a slight exhaustion, and then we push right back up into range. Um, Once again here, it happened a few times. It just continues to happen where we have buyers that are they're not really following through to the upside and they're just looking for a dip buy opportunity. So we don't short term, it seems like it's just dip buy opportunity. Long term is very bullish, but short term it just seems like it's I would say it's a little bit more difficult to get into a trade if you're not at the lows. And it's kind of hard to decide the lows for me. I would say the 5 day is going to be your solid area for lows. So either you want to look for a rejection, do a quick short, or look for a bounce off of it and then go long towards the previous highs. Essentially is how IWM is moving at this point. As far as pathing here, it was difficult. It was a little difficult for me to see any sort of pathing on a larger time frame. I did break it down to the 30 minute here. The 1 hour wasn't looking as clean. The 30 minute kind of gave me um a little bit more clarity. So for the upside or downside rather, what I'm looking at is potentially I'm looking to see if we have a head and shoulders that starts to play out a little bit higher. I don't think it's there just yet. Like even if we have a pullback, I still think we have a little bit more upside before we get that head and shoulders. So what I'm looking at is I want to see a trend start to break here or create a new strong trend here. So we have pretty decent strong green trend here as opposed to SPY where and QQQ where it's kind of slow grind. IWM had a pretty decent run up um lately, right? So what I want to see is us break out of that trend, create a head. So it could be a little bit higher. This could be the head here, but it's more of an equal head. So I'm looking more towards a little bit of higher push up I want to see a rejection near this consolidation trend here. So that's why I'm looking for a head that's a little bit higher up here, and we can create sort of a smaller head and shoulders in between it, where we have the head here, and we have that break like something like this, where we're breaking underneath that support here. The yellow is going to be the top of the yellow channel is your resistance, but the bottom is also a support because it's consolidating in that range. So a break out of there can give you that little bit of a micro head and shoulders. But what you really want to start to see is when we start to break, we do have a lot of consolidation here. So it's unlikely for us to just flush right through. So what I'm looking for is to see if we have a little bit of a chop near this range, and that would create that larger that larger head and shoulders here, where we have towards the downside. Good indicator of that is going to be repeated once we have this breakdown. Good indicator of that's going to be repeated rejections near that 209 area. We're starting to break above it, but it's pretty much been struggling this whole time. So I wouldn't short off of the break. I mean, you could take a quick scalp on the break of our orange trend line here, but what I would rather see is a breakdown, and then it starts to retest that 209 area, reject a bit, and then that would be a better confirmation for the downside. And like I said, right now IWM is pretty much buy low and sell high for the last few weeks now. So it seems like we're leading into a consolidation sort of phase, which is good, because if we start to flush too hard, it may affect SPY negatively. And if we start to run up, unless QQQ can also have a run up, it's really not going to do anything but create a chop for SPY. So I would like to see it just consolidate a little bit for either tech to step in, or financials, or another sector of SPY to step in to kind of give us some type of catalyst. Um, so more than likely, I think that we do have a little bit of a consolidation that could be playing out here, which would be this would be the range. One thing with IWM, you always want to identify the range. So maybe a 210 to about 205 range here, and let this be the range for the week. That would be ideal for us to continue an uptrend or flush to the downside for SPY. I would like to see a sort of a chop near that range taking place. And then if you want to do just quickly to the upside here, I do see a little bit of an inverse head and shoulders playing out here, where we have this sort of play out where we look for the break out of our yellow support here, pretty much that 509 area. We look for that breakdown similarly with our head and shoulders, where we look for that breakdown. And the confirmation for the head and shoulders was a rejection of the 209, right? Confirmation for the inverse is actually the opposite. Break over, recapture, and push to the upside for our inverse head and shoulders. So be on the lookout for that 209 area. I would look I want to see a failure underneath it first, right? Cuz all we have is pushes above. I would not like a support and bounce. That would not be ideal to me, because we're just struggling at overhead resistance, right? Where we're struggling to break above, trying to break out, we're struggling above. So ideally what I would like to see is a failure of that 209, and either a rejection or a recapture of that range and create a new uptrend. So be on the lookout for that. So 209 is going to be your major thing this week. I do want to see, like I said, a break below, reject, or break below and recover. One or the other would be very ideal for IWM. Like I said, I'm looking to see if build out a range here where we can maintain price action and continue to consolidate. That would be really ideal. Um, if we want to have any direction for our S&P. So let's see if that does take place this week. And pretty much, I think that wraps it up. I'm going to release my notes in a second here. I'm just going to take a screenshot of my notes. The only thing I do want to point out quickly before I go is our SMH, which is our semiconductors ETF. And essentially, this is what I'm looking at for my trade this week in Palantir and NVIDIA. Let's hope it's not terribly down. It's probably down, but hopefully we have a little bit of recover. We still have a few days on our hands. So essentially what I was looking at is we have we had this recapture of our 245 area. So 245 and 250 on SMH is an a very significant level. Like 245 specifically is a very significant level. Any price action below it usually has some type of strong downside on our Nvidia, Intel, AMD, stuff like that. And a break over 250 usually leads for some nice upside. Last couple times we broke over 250, Nvidia had new highs. He broke out. It broke out to all time highs. Palantir had all time highs. We hit the 100 level around there. So that this 250 245 range is very significant. And where are we right now? We're consolidating in this very significant range where price action is being the 245 is being repeated support, and our 5 is starting to catch up. So I do want to see us kind of, if you noticed here, I do have a little bit of a bull flag here playing out. So even if we do have a little bit of a pullback, I want us to uphold this trend the whole way out. And hopefully this week we could have support and recapture and a breakout and either test those 250s or at least make our way up to like the 249, somewhere basically in this range after the basically in this range after a breakout, whether we have a breakout here towards 250 or we have a breakout here towards 250 or we have a breakout here towards 250. I'm hoping that happens before this end of this week. um we never know what's going to happen, but we do have, like I said, this bear flag that's building out. So I'm waiting for us to maintain price action in that, do not break trend, and hope to see if we can get that 250 test. That would be amazing. You probably will see Nvidia go crazy if we do get 250. Like especially if we recapture 250, it's gonna Nvidia's gonna shoot like a star. So I'm not trying to be super one-sided because a break under 245 it could has the very strong potential to also have Nvidia drop dramatically. So we're kind of sitting in the middle here. I'm hoping for the best, but this is essentially what made me get into those contracts that I did get into this week. Was we had repeated support near this 245 area, so I'm going to be looking out for that to see if we have any break underneath it. If we do have any breaks under 245, that's when you should, I would say, assess your risks, whether you want to cut it or if you want to hold it for longer. Like I said, I'm holding it out. Um, I'm comfortable with the loss. I'm probably gonna hold it as long as I can hold it. Um, Not financial advice. That's totally up to you. But best way to manage your risk is going to be underneath 245 here. So if you start to see a break under 245, Nvidia starts failing some levels that you have, or Palantir starts failing some levels that you have, then assess your risk. But the SMH again is the ticker SMH. It is our semiconductor ETF. I would be on the lookout for that 245 area to uphold, and our trend on our bull flag here to uphold as well. And with that, I'm gonna wrap it up here and end the record.